"I left the ranch, but I never meant to leave you," whispered the Apache girl to her former boss. The morning air over the ranch was still and pale, the kind that carried dust softly instead of throwing it into storms. The sun had not fully risen yet, but the land was already awake. Horses shifted in their pens, birds moved between fence posts, and the old wooden house stood quietly as it always had. This place had seen many people come and go, but none had blended into it the way the Apache girl once did. She had arrived years earlier with little more than a small bag and a calm voice. She did not talk much about herself. She worked hard, listened carefully, and learned fast. From the first week, it was clear she understood land and animals in a way that could not be taught from books. She moved gently, spoke softly to horses, and never rushed a task. The ranch hands noticed. So did the boss. He was not an easy man to impress. He had run the ranch most of his adult life. He trusted routines more than people and believed respect was earned through work, not words. At first, he saw her as just another worker. But over time, her steady presence became something he relied on without realizing it. She was usually the first one up. Before the others arrived, she would already be checking fences, filling water troughs, and brushing horses that responded to her touch as if they had known her forever. She never complained, even on the hardest days. If something broke, she fixed it or quietly reported it. If someone was struggling, she helped without making it obvious. Yet behind her calm eyes was a heaviness no one truly understood. She carried her culture inside her, like a steady drumbeat that guided her steps. Her family, her people, her history mattered deeply to her. The ranch gave her work and stability, but it was not truly hers. She knew that. Still, over time, she began to feel something dangerous growing inside her: attachment. The boss noticed changes he could not explain. Sometimes she would pause and look across the land as if listening to something far away. Other times, she seemed distant, finishing her work with the same skill but less warmth. He thought she was tired. He thought she needed rest. He never asked. Their conversations were brief and practical. He gave instructions. She nodded and followed them. There was respect between them, but also a quiet distance shaped by roles and unspoken rules. He was the boss. She was the worker. Neither crossed that line. But feelings do not always respect boundaries. On her last evening at the ranch, nothing seemed different. She finished her tasks, fed the horses, and returned tools to their places. She stood for a long moment near the fence as the sky turned orange and purple. The land was beautiful in that quiet way that made leaving harder. She had made her decision days earlier, after a call from home that left her hands shaking. Family responsibilities were calling her back, cultural duties she could no longer delay. She had tried to ignore them, tried to believe she could balance both worlds, but deep down she knew she could not. Staying would mean losing a part of herself. Leaving would mean losing something else. That night, she packed slowly. She folded her clothes with care, placed a small beaded item from her grandmother into her bag, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her chest felt tight. She thought about the ranch, the horses, the rhythm of her days. She thought about the boss, how he trusted her, how his quiet approval had meant more to her than praise ever could. She almost went to his door, almost, but fear held her back. She did not know how to explain leaving without sounding ungrateful. She did not know how to say that staying was becoming too painful, and she did not know how to say goodbye without breaking something inside herself. So before dawn, she left. No note, no message. Just the sound of her footsteps fading into the morning. When the boss arrived later that day, he noticed her absence immediately. One of the horses had not been brushed the way she always did it. A gate was latched slightly differently than usual. These small details stood out because they were not hers. He asked around. No one had seen her that morning. Someone said her room was empty. At first, he felt irritated. People did not leave like that. It was irresponsible, disrespectful. He told himself she probably found other work and didn't bother saying goodbye. But as the day went on, irritation slowly turned into something else. The ranch felt wrong. He caught himself looking toward the path she used to walk every morning. He waited for her calm voice that never came. By evening, the silence felt heavier than the work itself. Days passed, then weeks. Her name came up less often, but her absence stayed. New workers tried to fill the gap, but none moved with the same understanding. Horses were more restless. Tasks took longer. The boss worked harder, staying later, trying to convince himself none of it mattered. But at night, when the ranch was quiet, he found himself thinking about her more than he wanted to admit. He wondered why she left without a word. He wondered if he had done something wrong. And somewhere far away, she wondered the same thing. She settled back with her people, surrounded by familiar voices and traditions. She fulfilled her responsibilities, helped her family, and tried to convince herself she had made the right choice. Yet sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees just right, she remembered the ranch. She remembered the steady work, the wide land, and the man who trusted her more than he ever said. She whispered his name once, alone, and felt tears she had promised herself she would not shed. Leaving had been necessary, but it had not been easy, and neither of them knew that this quiet goodbye was only the beginning of a story that time had not finished telling. The ranch moved forward, but it never truly felt the same. Days passed one after another, marked by dust, sun, and long hours of work. The boss kept his routine strong, waking early and pushing himself harder than before. He told himself that the ranch had survived worse. One worker leaving should not matter this much. Yet the silence left behind was louder than he expected. He began noticing how much she had done without asking for credit. Gates that once stayed strong now needed fixing more often. Horses that had trusted her calm hands grew uneasy with strangers. Small problems stacked up slowly, like stones added to a heavy load. He corrected workers more often, feeling frustrated but unsure why. He blamed himself for expecting too much from others when it had been her quiet consistency that once kept everything steady. At night, he sat on the porch longer than usual, watching the stars come out. He remembered how she used to pause in the evenings, just for a moment, as if listening to the land breathe. At the time, he never asked what she was thinking. Now he wished he had. He told himself it was just the loss of a good worker, nothing more. But deep inside, something uncomfortable began to grow, a sense that he had taken her presence for granted. He replayed moments in his mind. The way she waited patiently when he spoke, never interrupting. The way she followed instructions exactly, yet always found a better way to do things. The way she respected the land, not as property, but as something alive. He realized something then that unsettled him. He had trusted her more than anyone else on the ranch. Not with words, but with actions. He had allowed her access to responsibilities he gave no one else. And yet, he had never once asked how she was doing. This thought stayed with him. Meanwhile, far from the ranch, she was learning how heavy absence could be. Returning home had not been easy, but it was necessary. Her family welcomed her with warmth and relief. They needed her strength, her patience, her ability to listen. She stepped back into familiar rhythms, helping elders, guiding younger ones, and honoring traditions that had shaped her since childhood. Outwardly, she seemed steady, but inside, her thoughts often drifted back to the ranch. She missed the early mornings, the quiet before the world fully woke. She missed the smell of hay and leather. Most of all, she missed the feeling of purpose she had built there, piece by piece. Sometimes she felt guilty for missing it at all. Her people came first. She knew that, yet the heart does not follow rules easily. She wondered if the boss was angry with her. She imagined him shaking his head, disappointed by her sudden departure. The thought hurt more than she expected. She had never meant to leave without explanation, but fear and urgency had pushed her forward. There were nights when she sat by the fire and thought about writing a letter. She would start sentences in her mind, trying to find the right words. But each time, she stopped herself. What could she say that would make sense? How could she explain feelings she barely understood herself? Back at the ranch, the boss tried to distract himself with work. He took on tasks he normally would have delegated. He repaired fences, checked equipment, and rode out farther than usual. Physical exhaustion helped quiet his thoughts, but only for a while. One afternoon, while sorting through old supplies, he found something that stopped him cold. It was a small tool she had used often, left behind by mistake. He held it in his hands longer than necessary, surprised by the tight feeling in his chest. That was the moment he finally admitted the truth to himself. Her leaving had affected him more than he wanted to admit. He began asking around, carefully at first. Where had she gone? Did anyone hear from her? Most people knew little. Someone mentioned she had returned to her community. Another said family matters called her back. He nodded, pretending that was enough information. But it was. Questions began to haunt him. Had she felt unwelcome? Had he made her feel invisible? He replayed conversations, wondering if his reserved nature had come across as coldness. He had always believed that giving someone steady work was enough to show respect. Now he wondered if he was wrong. As weeks turned into months, the seasons began to change. The land shifted colors, and with it came a quiet reminder that time did not stop for anyone. Still, her absence stayed present in ways he could not explain. He found himself talking to the horses more than before, filling the silence with words that had nowhere else to go. He spoke about weather, about work, about nothing at all. And sometimes, without meaning to, he spoke about her. He never used her name out loud. But the memory of her stayed close. Far away, she faced her own struggles. Being home meant responsibilities, but it also meant facing parts of herself she had avoided. The ranch had been a place where she could focus on work and push aside deeper questions. Now those questions returned. Who was she becoming? Where did she truly belong? She loved her people and her culture. That was never in doubt. But the ranch had shown her a different kind of life, one built on shared labor, quiet trust, and land that responded to care. Leaving had protected her roots, but it had also left her feeling divided. She tried to ignore the pull of the past. She stayed busy, helping where she was needed. Yet sometimes, when she caught sight of wide open land, her chest tightened. She remembered the boss's steady presence. His silence had once felt distant, but now she understood it differently. He was not unkind. He was simply shaped by a life where emotions were shown through actions, not words. That realization brought both comfort and regret. She wished she had spoken to him before leaving, wished she had trusted him enough to explain. But time moved forward and the chance felt gone. One evening, the boss sat alone in the ranch house, going through paperwork. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. It sounded almost like footsteps. For a moment, he imagined her walking back through the gate, calm and steady as always. The thought surprised him, and he let out a quiet breath. He did not know if he would ever see her again, but he knew one thing for certain. Her leaving had changed him. He had learned that silence could hide important things. That respect also meant asking questions, and that sometimes the people who leave the quietest leave the deepest mark. Neither of them knew it yet, but life had not finished weaving their paths together. The distance between them was real, but so was the understanding slowly growing on both sides. And somewhere between memory and hope, the story continued, waiting for the moment when truth would finally find its voice. Time has a quiet way of softening sharp edges, but it does not erase what matters. Nearly 2 years had passed since the Apache girl left the ranch. Life had moved forward for both of them, yet certain moments still pulled them backward without warning. For the boss, those moments came unexpectedly. A horse would respond to a soft command the way it once did for her. A stretch of land would glow at sunset, and he would remember how she used to pause there just for a second as if giving thanks. He no longer tried to push these thoughts away. He accepted them, even when they made his chest feel tight. He had changed since her departure. Slowly, without realizing it at first, he began treating people differently. He asked questions he once would have skipped. He listened longer. He learned that leadership was not only about giving work, but also about seeing the people doing it. Others noticed the change. The ranch felt calmer again, not because it was the same as before, but because he had grown. Still, something unfinished stayed with him. For her, life within her community had settled into a steady rhythm. She had become someone others leaned on. Elders trusted her judgment. Younger ones looked to her for guidance. She carried herself with quiet strength, shaped by both her roots and her time away. But some nights, when the sky stretched wide and clear, she felt the pull of the past like a soft ache. She wondered how the ranch looked now. She wondered if the boss ever thought of her. Most of all, she wondered if leaving without a word had closed a door forever. Then came the invitation. It was for a regional gathering meant to bring nearby communities together. There would be shared meals, music, stories, and discussions about land and cooperation. Her name was suggested by several elders. She hesitated at first, unsure why her heart suddenly began to race. When she learned where the gathering would be held, her breath caught. It was near the ranch. She told herself it meant nothing. Many events took place in that area. Still, the thought of being so close stirred emotions she had worked hard to keep calm. After a long night of reflection, she agreed to go. The day of the gathering arrived under a bright, open sky. People traveled from different places, bringing food, laughter, and stories. She arrived quietly, greeting familiar faces and offering help where needed. She focused on tasks, the same way she always had. Then she saw him. He stood a short distance away, talking with others, older now but familiar. His posture was the same, steady and grounded. For a moment, everything around her seemed to fade. She felt as if time had folded in on itself. He noticed her at nearly the same moment. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then she turned slightly, and there was no doubt. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with surprise so sharp it almost took his breath away. Neither of them moved right away. People passed between them. Conversations continued. Life went on, unaware of the quiet storm forming in that small space. Finally, he took a step forward. She did the same. They stopped a few feet apart. "Hello," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual. "Hello," she replied. There were many things they could have said. Questions, explanations, apologies, but none of those words came easily. Instead, they stood there, sharing a silence that felt different from the ones before. This silence held understanding, not distance. They spoke briefly, carefully, like people crossing unfamiliar ground. She said she was helping with the gathering. He said the ranch had been invited to support the event. They nodded, as if discussing weather instead of years of unspoken thoughts. Before either of them could say more, someone called her name. She excused herself, offering a small, respectful smile. As she walked away, her hands trembled slightly. Seeing him again had reopened feelings she thought she had settled. Yet it also brought a strange sense of relief. He looked well. He did not look angry. He watched her go, feeling a mix of emotions he could not easily name. Seeing her alive and strong eased something inside him. At the same time, it reminded him of how much had been left unsaid. The rest of the day passed slowly for both of them. They caught brief glimpses of each other across the gathering. Sometimes their eyes met. Each time, something quiet passed between them, like a question waiting for the right moment. That moment came near the end of the day. As people began to leave, he found her standing alone near the edge of the field, looking out at the land. The sun was low, casting long shadows. It felt familiar, almost too familiar. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. She nodded. They walked a short distance away, stopping near a line of trees. The sounds of the gathering faded, leaving only the wind and distant voices. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said honestly. "Neither did I," she replied. He took a breath. "I wondered what happened to you." She looked down for a moment, then back up. "I had to go home, my family needed me." He nodded. "I understand that now." Her eyes softened at his words. "I should have told you." "Yes," he said gently, "you should have, but I also should have asked." That surprised her. She had not expected him to say that. They stood quietly again. This time the silence felt less heavy. "I never meant to leave the way I did," she said. "I didn't know how to explain myself. I didn't make it easy to talk," he admitted. "I thought giving space was the same as giving respect." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes people need words too," he nodded, accepting the truth of it. There was no anger in this conversation, only honesty, calm and careful. They spoke about small things after that. The ranch, her work within her community, how time had changed them both. As the light faded, they knew the moment was ending. "I'm glad I saw you," he said. "So am I," she replied. They parted without promises, but also without regret. Something important had shifted. A weight had been lifted, even if the story was not finished. That night, as she lay awake, she replayed the conversation in her mind. For the first time since leaving, she felt at peace with her choice. Seeing him again had shown her that understanding was possible, even after silence. At the ranch, he sat on the porch and looked out at the land. He felt calmer than he had in a long time. Meeting her had answered questions he carried quietly for years. Neither of them knew what the future held, but both knew that their paths had crossed again for a reason, and this time they were ready to listen. After the gathering, life did not return to normal for either of them. Something had shifted quietly but clearly, like the land after a gentle rain. They went back to their separate worlds, yet the space between them no longer felt empty. It felt awake. For the boss, the days that followed were filled with thought. He worked as usual, rising early, checking the animals, walking the land. But now, memories no longer came with regret alone. They came with understanding. He realized that seeing her again had changed how he viewed the past. Her leaving was no longer a mystery filled with assumptions. It was a human choice shaped by duty and fear, much like choices he himself had made over the years. He found himself remembering moments with new clarity, times when she had wanted to speak but held back, times when he had noticed something in her eyes and chosen not to ask. He understood now that silence could protect, but it could also isolate. For the first time in years, he wrote a letter, not to her directly, but to himself. He wrote about leadership, about responsibility, about how strength could exist alongside openness. Writing helped him put words to thoughts he had always kept buried. When he finished, he folded the paper and placed it in a drawer, unsure if anyone would ever read it. Still, it mattered that the words existed. Meanwhile, she returned to her daily responsibilities within her community, but her heart felt lighter. Seeing him again had answered a question she had carried alone for too long. He was not angry. He had not erased her from his memory. That knowledge gave her peace. Yet with peace came honesty. She began to admit to herself that leaving the ranch had not only been about duty, it had also been about fear. Fear of belonging too deeply. Fear of caring more than she was ready to name. The ranch had given her a sense of stability she had never expected. And he, with his quiet trust, had given her something just as powerful: respect. She talked with an elder one evening, someone who knew her well. Without naming him or the ranch, she spoke about leaving a place that had shaped her and the weight of unfinished words. The elder listened carefully, then said, "Leaving does not always mean abandoning. Sometimes it means learning what you carry with you." Those words stayed with her. Weeks passed, then months. Seasons shifted again, and slowly, naturally, their paths crossed once more. It began with practical reasons. The ranch had started a cooperative effort with nearby communities, focusing on land care and shared resources. Meetings were planned, discussions scheduled. Her name came up again, suggested by people who trusted her voice. This time she did not hesitate. When they met again, it was different from the gathering. There were no crowds, no distractions. Just work, conversation, and shared purpose. They spoke more freely now with less caution. They discussed land, challenges, and hopes for the future. Each conversation built something quiet between them. Still, deeper truths remained unspoken. One afternoon, after a long meeting, she stayed behind to help organize materials. The others left, one by one, until it was just the two of them. The room felt calm, filled with late afternoon light. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said carefully. She looked up attentive. "Go ahead." "Why didn't you come back?" he asked. "Even just to visit." She paused. The question was gentle, but it touched something tender. "I didn't trust myself," she answered honestly. "I thought if I came back too soon, I wouldn't be strong enough to leave again." He nodded slowly. "I think I understand that." She studied his face, noticing how time had softened some lines and deepened others. "You've changed," she said. "So have you," he replied. They shared a small smile. Later that day, they walked together across the land near the ranch. The ground was familiar to both of them. She pointed out places that still held meaning. He listened, truly listened, not as a boss, but as someone learning. They stopped near the fence where she had once stood on her last evening there. The memory hung between them. "I stood here the night before I left," she said quietly. "I wanted to say goodbye." He felt his chest tighten. "I wish you had." "So do I," she replied. The wind moved gently around them. The moment felt fragile but also strong. "I used to think leaving without words was easier," she continued. "But silence carries its own weight." He looked at her then, not rushing, not hiding. "I used to think not asking questions was respectful, but I see now that it can feel like distance." That was when something shifted again, deeper this time. They were no longer speaking around the truth. They were standing inside it. Over the next weeks, their connection grew naturally, not rushed, not forced, built on shared work and honest conversation. There were no promises, no expectations, just presence. She visited the ranch more often, helping with projects, advising on land care. Each visit brought back memories, but they no longer hurt. Instead, they felt like threads being gently woven back into place. He found himself looking forward to those days, not because of what might happen, but because of how grounded he felt when she was there. She brought balance, not disruption. One evening, after a long day, they sat on the porch as the sun lowered behind the hills. The sky turned soft colors, familiar and comforting. "This place shaped me," she said quietly, "but it doesn't own me." He nodded. "And you shaped this place more than you know." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "I was afraid you would think I didn't care." "I never thought that," he said without hesitation. "I just didn't understand." She exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she had held inside for years. As night settled in, they sat in comfortable silence. This silence was different from the ones before. It was not built from fear or distance, but from trust. Still, one truth remained just beneath the surface, waiting. She knew she would have to say it one day, not because she owed it to him, but because she owed it to herself. And he sensed it too. That there was more she wanted to share, more she needed to say. The story was moving toward that moment, not with urgency, but with care, with patience shaped by everything they had learned apart. The land listened as it always had, and time, for once, did not feel like an enemy. It felt like an ally, guiding them toward words that could no longer be avoided. The moment she had been carrying inside her for so long arrived quietly, the way important moments often do. There was no warning sign, no dramatic event. Just an ordinary evening that felt different because both of them were finally ready. The day had been long. They had worked together on a final project connected to the land partnership, walking the fields, checking plans, and talking through small details. By the time the work ended, the sun was already low, painting the sky in soft gold and gray. She stayed longer than usual. They sat outside near the old porch, where the air was calm and the world felt far away. The ranch was quiet, settled for the night. Crickets began their steady sound and the land rested as if listening. Neither of them spoke at first. He noticed her hands folded in her lap, fingers slowly tightening and loosening. He had learned enough by now to recognize when she was gathering courage. So he waited. Not with impatience, but with respect. "I need to say something," she finally said. He turned toward her fully. "Take your time." She looked out at the land instead of at him. "When I left, I told myself I was only leaving a job, a place. I told myself that if I didn't name anything else, it wouldn't hurt as much." He listened without interrupting. "But that wasn't the truth," she continued. "I wasn't just leaving the ranch. I was leaving you, and I didn't know how to do that honestly." Her voice stayed steady, but emotion lived underneath it. He felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with recognition. He had sensed this truth for a long time, but hearing it spoken made it real in a new way. She took a slow breath. "I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I cared too much and I didn't know what to do with that feeling." The words settled between them. For a moment he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. "I thought you left because you didn't feel seen here." She shook her head. "I felt seen." That was part of the problem. That answer stayed with him. She turned to face him now, her eyes open and honest. "I never meant to disappear from your life. I just didn't know how to stay without losing myself." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to ask you to stay without crossing a line I thought existed." They both let out small breaths, almost at the same time. It felt like something long held had finally been released. "I want you to know," he said, "that your leaving forced me to look at myself. At how I lead, at how I connect with people. You changed me even when you were gone." Her eyes softened. "I wondered," she said. "I hoped." Silence followed, but it was not heavy. It felt complete. After a while she spoke again. "I don't regret leaving. I needed to go home. I needed to grow, but I regret how I left." "I don't regret waiting," he replied, "because it brought us here with honesty." The wind moved gently across the land. Somewhere nearby, a horse shifted in its stall. They did not make promises that night. They did not rush to define anything. What they shared was something stronger than quick decisions. It was understanding built slowly, through absence, reflection, and return. In the weeks that followed, their connection settled into something natural. She continued working with both her community and the ranch. He adjusted his role, allowing space for shared leadership rather than quiet distance. They learned each other again, this time without fear. There were moments of laughter now, moments that once might have felt out of place. There were also moments of quiet companionship, sitting together without needing to fill the space with words. People noticed the change. They noticed how she walked the land with confidence, no longer torn between worlds. They noticed how he listened more openly, how his presence felt steadier, warmer. The ranch itself seemed to respond, thriving under care that came from cooperation rather than control. One afternoon, as they stood near the same fence where she had once paused on her last night, she spoke softly. "I used to think leaving meant breaking something forever. And now?" he asked. "Now I think leaving taught us how to come back better." He smiled at that. As time passed, they found a balance that honored both of their lives. She did not give up her roots. He did not lose himself either. What grew between them was not possession or obligation, but choice. Choice made daily, choice made with clarity. One evening, long after the sun had set, she rested her head lightly against the porch post and said the words that had once lived only in her chest. "I left the ranch," she whispered, "but I never meant to leave you." He did not answer right away. Instead, he placed his hand gently over hers, grounding present. "I know," he said, "and I'm glad you came back when you were ready." There was no grand ending to their story, no loud declaration, no sudden change that erased the past. What they had was quieter, stronger, built on truth spoken at the right time. The ranch remained a place of work and land, but it also became a place of understanding, a place where silence no longer hid important things, where people were seen, not just relied upon. And for both of them, it became proof that leaving does not always mean loss. Sometimes, it means learning how to return with honesty, respect, and a heart finally brave enough to speak.